Hello everyone, I'm Figuristic Productions, and today we're going to be looking at the Mcfarlane Batman Arkham Asylum Mega Figure Killer Croc. And with that said, let's get right into it. Starting off with articulation, Killer Croc's head sits much lower and at a different angle than most Mcfarlane figures. However, he still has 360-degree head rotation. He is able to look this far up, only this far down, but he is able to still tilt his head side to side despite the collar on his neck. His arms are both able to go roughly this high up, and each arm also has 360-degree rotation. The arms do not have bicep swivel, and they are only on single jointed elbows that go a little under 90 degrees. Each of his hands are also on single hinges that allow for horizontal movement compared to the usual Mcfarlane wrist balls. And moving on to the torso, you can already see that Killer Croc has a very, very loose torso. As you can see here, the slightest amount of weight sometimes can result in a lot of flopping around. But he still has upper chest rotation of 360 degrees and lower torso rotation with 360 degrees. Altogether, he is able to lean back this far, lean forward this far, and he's able to tilt side to side. Killer Croc's legs are able to go this far up and kick roughly this far back. In addition, he's also able to do the splits with his legs as well. Killer Croc's legs are on double jointed knees that go about this far back, and his feet are able to go this high up, this far down, are able to pivot due to the softer plastic used for the bottom of the pants, and has toe articulation as well. It's also important to note that this Killer Croc that I have, his foot is actually broken here. As you can see, the pin broke off, so all I really need to do is just add in another pin and put it back in place. However, this does connect to accessories, as I got this Killer Croc loose, so I do not have his trading card, and I do not have his DC Multiverse stand as well. But off of the top of my head, I can tell you a little bit about what I know about Killer Croc. What I do know is that Killer Croc was born by the name of Waylon Jones. He was born with a genetic and also skin disorder that allowed him to develop reptilic skin, sharp teeth, sharp claws, and also his reptilic features as well. In some form of media, Killer Croc has a much more pronounced snout and even has his own tail sometimes as well. But over time, Killer Croc began to be ostracized by many societies he had joined, or just the people in public. So he grew the reputation of being a monster, and eventually he took the mantle of a monster, eventually naming himself or gained the reputation of others and being named Killer Croc. Eventually taking up the name of Killer Croc, Killer Croc is now a bloodthirsty and vicious criminal. However, he still has some humanity in him at certain moments, such as in the Arkham games in Arkham Knight, where he was being tortured and wanted nothing but revenge on the person that had been experimenting on him into his monstrous form. Killer Croc is said to be about 8 to 9 feet tall in the Arkham games, with some other heights kind of displaying all over the place in many other forms of media. With superhuman strength and his vicious bloodthirstiness, and also his razor-sharp teeth and claws, Killer Croc poses a great threat to Batman, especially in the sewers of Gotham. But moving on, I'd like to talk about Killer Croc's sculpt and also color scheme now. Now, what I will say about this figure is that the sculpt is amazing. I love it. My only issue is that there's not enough paint to go around for this figure. As you can kind of see on his stomach, there is some white dry brushing that sort of shows the chest, but it's not enough to distinguish it from most of the other things on the figure. As you can see here, he actually has spikes that are on his elbow or almost on his wrist right here. But because there's not a lot of color to it, it kind of blends in sometimes, and it's hard to notice at some points. I feel like most of the paint was directed to the face, actually. As you can see here, Killer Croc's eyes are actually painted a yellow, but also have this black shadowing here to bring out his eyes more, and also even has his teeth and his, I guess, chin spikes also painted as well. Now I do like that his back spines and also his head have some black wash to it. It really helps to show, I guess, the back, and even like, well, right here, it's kind of worn off here, probably because they weren't able to blackwash that area. But it really shows like just the back piece of it, and it really displays like the armored hide or just reptilic skin that he has. But because there's not enough paint, it's hard to distinguish certain areas. Like right here, this is more like the back of Killer Croc, but this right here is a completely different paneling or the skin. So there's kind of a small difference to it, but because there's not enough paint, it's sort of hard to see sometimes. As you can see here, this paneling or structure sculpt actually continues onto the arms kind of here with a little bit of variation, but because there's no color, there's not really any distinction between it. This even goes for the open hand as well. As you can see, there's a lot of texturing onto it. And while there is some blackwash in some areas, it's not enough to bring out more of the details that's on Killer Croc. But moving on, I'd like to say that I actually really like that they gave Killer Croc this collar. Yeah, I think it actually really fits him and it looks really cool. My only issue with this is that, or my two issues with this is that one, it's not removable, and two, it's actually inaccurate. This side right here with the rivet or the screw going into this side of the metal should actually also be on this side. And I believe this is because due to the digital art that I've seen, or even the trading cards that I've seen of Killer Croc, in the image, it's a digital render from the game, and they have him facing like this. And I'm thinking Mcfarlane probably didn't see this on the other side and chose to avoid that, putting on the design anyways. But what I do like is that they actually sculpted this little like link here that you can actually put a chain in, as many YouTubers have done by simply drilling or making a hole there and attaching a real chain onto it. Another thing I think is missing from the figure, I really wish that we had more chains on this figure, especially because there is definitely supposed to be a chain on his collar piece here. I'm not too sure if there's chains on his wrist, but it would have been nice to see them too. And also, there are definitely, I know for a fact, chains on his legs as well, usually on the side here, with even the links right here providing an option for you to attach a bunch of chains to it as well. Another thing I really like is his feet. I really like that they sculpted out Killer Croc's feet, but also added the brown to this to make it look like he's been stepping in mud all the time or walking in water. It really makes sense because he's used to living in a watery and swampy condition. So it would make sense for him to have some dirt and grime on there. In addition, I do love this rope acting as like a belt piece for his pants as well. It just adds that little character distinction between him, especially in the game, because most of all the Arkham inmates, the normal people, look mostly the same with some differences within ethnicities or even just like some face paint or coloring or even some talk too. But the super villains like Killer Croc, Joker are the most distinct ones because they have somewhat comic accurate costumes while still looking like they've been stuck in Arkham the entire time. And I really like that. Like for instance, right here, these pants. Now I do have a couple issues with them, but I do like the way they're sculpted. I think they actually look fairly decent. My main issue is that it goes from this matte rubber to this kind of satin hard plastic and then matte hard plastic and then a satin or glossy finish again for the bottom legs as well. I kind of wish that it was just all one color scheme or at least one finished color scheme or at least layering scheme because it would have looked really good if this was just all matte. But because of the difference between it, it's so noticeable and it is kind of weird and it throws off a lot of the figures sometimes. But in general, I would say that the sculpt and the paint is fairly okay. Or at least the paint is okay while the sculpt is actually pretty amazing. And the biggest point I have to say about paint and sculpt in between is Killer Croc's overall design. Now, I'm not too sure if this is completely true to the game or completely accurate to the game, but I will say that I know for a fact that this color definitely isn't. Because this color is kind of like a lime, almost a key lime green color with like some white in between of it. Like as you can see like on the chest here, but there's some other areas that have a little bit of white on it and it makes it look like this really pale green. But in the game, Croc has a lot of differentiation. He has like a bony white chest piece and a little bit on his arms and underneath his hands. But on his back, he's more of like a dark, almost a metallic green a little bit with a lot of differentiation. So I wish that McFarlane could have incorporated that into this figure. I think this would have been one of his best looking figures if he had done that. Another thing is that I know it's a mega figure, but I really don't like the single jointed elbows. I really wish they could find some way to do double jointed elbows because I think it would be really cool if you could actually have him grabbing the Batman and his arms are able to go up more and he's able to actually fully go in as well. So that way he could fully grab into someone like this. Like you see here, he can't really grab in that much. And that also leads me to my another point as well too, is that I wish he came with more hands. He should have came with another alternate hand for open on the right side and a fisted hand for the left side as well. I wish McFarlane would do this because I think that his mega figures are actually pretty cool overall. I like this Killer Croc. I think the Bane looks really cool, even though I don't have him. And although the Man Bat is probably one of my least favorite, other than the Titan Joker, I really wish that he would take the opportunity to do something really out of the box, kind of. Like for Man Bat, for example, he could completely replace the arms with open, spread out wings. I think that would be really cool to see. And something similar with Croc would be really cool too, adding on the actual chains. Uh, Adding a little bit more color, a little bit more black wash, a little bit more differentiation, and even just adding those alternate hands overall. I think that would really improve this figure. But I will say that in the end, I don't think this figure is a terrible figure. I think that the sculpt is really good, and I am a fan of Killer Croc, so I will say that it may seem biased to a certain point, as I really do like Killer Croc. However, I do admit that this figure has a lot of shortcomings, such as the hands, part of the paint job, and just the overall design a little bit with how the arms are. Another thing that just reminded me of is that it's kind of hard to pose this guy sometimes. As you can see here, or even saw earlier, it's kind of hard to move Croc's arms sometimes. I'm not sure if it's because of the ratchet joint that McFarlane usually uses for his arms, or ratchet-like joint, or if it's because it's sculpted into the joint itself when it's moving. So maybe that's what's causing a little like friction or a little bit interference with him moving his arms. But I do think that he's kind of weird to pose sometimes. And the main issue with that would definitely be the loose chest here. Now, I did get this figure for loose, so I don't know if it was like this before, or possibly maybe someone had this before and something had happened to make it a lot more loose. But I will say that overall, I still do enjoy this figure. I do think that it's really cool. I think that it's really nice. And while I do think that there can be improvements, I definitely say that if you're a fan of Killer Croc, I'd say get this figure for the most part. There's not many Killer Croc figures out here. So I'd say if you ever see it for a somewhat decent price, hey, go for it. And also, I want to say that eventually I will do a custom on this guy too. This guy is a gold mine for customizers or people who just want to test out their painting skills. He's got the scope for it, and honestly, I think even a simple black wash would make this guy look amazing. However, I do have something that's a little bit different in mind for that, so we'll just have to wait and see. For a size comparison, here's Killer Croc next to the Three Jokers Batman and also the McFarlane Arkham Asylum Batman. And I just gotta say, side by side comparison like this, Croc is huge. In a good way though, because he's big enough to the point where he looks accurate to the game, but also not too big in the sense where he looks way too large. And I just gotta say right now, from images I've seen, I think Solomon Grundy either should have been this size of Croc or even bigger. Probably even bigger, as in Arkham City, he even grabs Batman by the waist. Kind of like what Croc did to the Warden in Arkham Asylum, now that I think of it. Or Arkham Knight, actually. For a Batman villains side comparison, here's Croc next to the Arkham Knight Scarecrow and also the Three Jokers Clown. Now for a more animalistic comparison, here's Croc next to the NECA King Kong and also the McFarlane Injustice 2's Gorilla Grodd. And I will say that Gorilla Grodd should be much taller, probably the same size as the NECA King Kong, and I think he would have been actually a pretty good size. But with that said, I'd like to say that overall, this Croc is actually not that bad a figure. I think I've grown to love it over time just because it's Killer Croc, and also that this figure was actually a pretty good opportunity for me. And I do think that I can actually develop a pretty awesome custom when the time comes. And for a weird comparison, here's Croc next to a Kirkland water bottle, just to show how big he is in general. So if you have a water bottle near your hand or near your side, grab it. You might even be able to see the size for yourself of how big Croc is. And for a final size comparison, here's Killer Croc next to the Marvel Legends Vulcan. In the end, I'd say that this figure has really grown on me. While it does have its shortcomings, such as the paint and the articulation a little bit, I would say that I actually don't mind this figure as something in my collection. It's not too bad an addition, and I'd say that if you're looking for a Killer Croc to add to your collection or your Batman Rogues villain, I would say definitely pick it up. But let me know what you think in the comments below. If you feel like it, comment, subscribe, and hit the like button. But with that said, I've been Figuristic Productions, and I'll see you all in the next one. Hope you have a good one.